Howdy, it's Kyle coming from my under construction basement with your non virus, non political geography news for July 2020, where I'll be going over the top news stories of the past month that has something to do with geography. And unfortunately, a couple of the top stories of the past month are negative, so I'll go over those first and get to some of the more fun stuff after that. So I want to start off by discussing the really bad wildfire season that's going on in Arizona right now. There were many large fires burning at the same time all throughout June, the largest of which was called the Bush Fire, which is located just northeast of Phoenix. It's burned approximately 200,000 acres in the Tonto National Forest, and about 2,000 people had to be evacuated from their homes. So that big one is just northeast of Phoenix, and there's another one burning east of Phoenix called the Sawtooth Fire, which has burned 25,000 acres. The second largest wildfire that's been burning in the state is called the Magnum Fire, which is in the northern portion of the state, not too far from the north rim of the Grand Canyon, and it's burned about 72,000 acres. Northeast of Tucson is another big one that was burning called the Bighorn Fire that's burned over 25,000 acres as well. The Blue River Fire in the eastern portion of the state near the New Mexico border has burned over 30,000 acres. The Brigham Fire, also in eastern Arizona, has burned over 25,000 acres as well. And there are many other smaller fires burning throughout the state, and they're all burning in the eastern part of the state where you have a lot more mountains and brush. The western portion of the state is where you have the open desert. And as of the time of me recording this, all of these fires are still raging but have been largely contained. But overall, this is going to be an above average year for wildfires in the western U.S., so be careful out there. But unfortunately, these big Arizona wildfires aren't the only major disaster for June. There was also a 7.4 earthquake that rocked the state of Oaxaca in southern Mexico. Now, fortunately, it didn't occur in a big city. It was a pretty small town where it was centered, and there was quote-unquote only $100 million worth of damage, but a 7.4 earthquake is a pretty massive quake. The quake was felt pretty heavily in Mexico City, but the earthquake warning sirens went off a minute before the quake, and folks were able to get out of buildings to safety. And there was also a 2.3-foot tsunami at the beach resort town of Acapulco. A 2.3-foot tsunami doesn't sound like very much, but 3 feet is above the center of gravity for most people and could potentially knock you over. Mexico is one of the most seismically active places in the world, especially in Oaxaca, where this quake occurred. So next, I want to discuss the Saharan dust storm that affected the southeastern United States at the end of June. And this made pretty big news, but I want to mention a couple of things about it. So it starts by really strong easterly winds coming out of the Saharan. It picks up big clouds of sand and goes across the Atlantic Ocean, rides the easterly trade winds all the way to the Caribbean. And then from there it went to the Gulf of Mexico and made quote-unquote landfall in Texas. It's a big dry mass of hot air between about 6,000 and 15,000 feet elevation that's bringing all of the sand across the entire ocean. And it's very similar to the formation of hurricanes that form off the west coast of Africa and come across the Atlantic Ocean to the southeast. These dust storms happen every year, but they usually die out over the ocean as vertical shear in the upper atmosphere kind of chops its head off, so to say. And this is also just like hurricanes. So tropical systems form every year off the west coast of Africa, but they usually are killed off in the middle of the ocean by vertical shear in the upper atmosphere. So if this would have been a weather storm coming across the ocean instead of a dust storm, then it would have been a hurricane that made landfall in Texas. All right, so that's enough negative stuff. Now for some stuff that's much more fun. Geologists have confirmed the presence of a large underwater continent that they're calling Zealandia. And what this is a huge, mostly underwater continent just off the coast of Australia. 94% of it is underwater, and the 6% that is above water is what we know as New Zealand. The overall continent is about 2/3 the size of Australia, and it would be the smallest continent if it were all above the surface. So what we know as New Zealand are the highest points of this continent. So it's the 2 main islands of New Zealand and a bunch of smaller islands around the area as well. So geologists pulled very large sediment cores from about 8,000 feet below sea level and discovered some pretty cool things. They found all kinds of fossil specimens, pollen samples, and shells from animals that live in warm, shallow seas. So New Zealand is not warm, shallow seas at all. It's cold, deep seas, but these old prehistoric animals lived in what was warm and shallow. The continent includes igneous, metamorphic, and sedimentary rocks. So that means it was formed by volcanoes, metamorphosed by heat and pressure, and it then underwent erosion through millions of years. So although this might not be the most important news in the world for a lot of people, it is a huge discovery for geologists. And now for something that warms my heart. The University of New Mexico and New Mexico State University have created a joint PhD program for their respective departments of geography. Prior to this, there was no doctoral program in geography in the entire state. What's pretty cool is that each university has different specialties within geography. The University of New Mexico specializes in ecology, historical geography, health geography, and GIS, which is Geographic Information Systems. New Mexico State University also specializes in GIS, but also has resource management, transboundary water governance, flood risk assessment, general physical geography, and wildlife management. So in general, the University of New Mexico is more geared towards human and cultural geography, and New Mexico State is more geared towards physical geography. And studying geography at college is often misunderstood because I'll tell folks I have a degree in geography and they're like, wow, you know all the countries and their capitals, congratulations. But there's so much more to it than that. It's a very wide discipline. There's so many things you can study within geography. Next, I want to discuss a really cool software program that's been developed by geographers at Drexel University in Philadelphia. It's urban planning software. It's essentially a video game, really. It's called Simulated Interactive Management for Philadelphia. And if you're familiar with games like SimCity or Populous or Sid Meier's Civilization, it's kind of like that, but it's based on real stuff. So with this software, you play as the city manager. You have a budget, you face state funding cuts, you go through natural disasters, you just use real data and real world experience. So using this software, some of the things you'll do is use real data to help make decisions to help improve the community. You deal with real estate development and how that affects rental rates, food distribution, crime, population flight, gentrification, zoning, incident reports, and property values. You have to deal with political pressure from this group and that group and just deal with very stressful situations that city managers often have to do. So even though this is for a class and it's meant to be educational and kind of quote unquote work, this sounds like really fun to me. I would love to get a hold of this software. I might have to enroll in a class at Drexel just to do it. So there you have it, the top geography news stories for July 2020. And I'll try to keep things positive moving forward, being that almost everything on the news nowadays is pretty negative. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up to let me know you approve, and subscribe to this channel if you're interested in nerdy geography stuff, road tripping across the country, travel in the US kind of stuff, everything kind of from a nerdy perspective. But yeah, thanks for watching. Geography King signing out.